Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 59. We're going to be talking about Stranger Things Season 3 from 2019. And to prepare you, our next episode will be our debut side hustle episode of Self-Help for Nihilists.
So listen up, folks. It is a kind of a high concept idea at the moment where we're going to be looking at various modes of self-help, probably some of the literature associated with it, and then we're going to be trying out some stuff for ourselves. I don't even remember why we came up with this idea.
I don't know. I think it's really just you and I sort of have this obsession with self-help, whether it is, new age crystal stuff or powerlifting or, athleticism or yoga or astrology.
For the record, I hate astrology.
I'm the two people in this room probably hate astrology more than anyone else. I shouldn't say hate. Deliberately misunderstand, I think, will be how I describe my relationship to it. Anyway, so spending all this time reading self-help literature and, Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, and it all feels like it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of this way of navigating yourself through your life, through culture. How the hell are you going to waste your time before you die? And I think that a question that you and I grapple with often is the concept of nihilism, trying to create meaning in a life that seems to actually have none, unless your parents beat it into you and you can't shake it. So we're making a podcast addressing all that, and it's going to be uplifting, informative, and inspirational.
Yeah, and what did we say the other day or earlier? It was like a rhetoric class taught about Eat, Pray, Love, but taught by goths.
Yes.
So maybe that's all that you guys need to know.
That's the byline.
But we're taking in questions now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our email address, nihilists@scarythoughts.org. Nihilist with an S at the end, plural, since there's more of us out here in the world. And just shoot us some questions you might have about self-help or some ideas or things that helped you out. Like, for example, I am a huge fan of Dave Ramsey, which is odd for a lot of people due to his evangelicalism, but I think his advice is pretty good.
I take in maybe an hour or two of Dave Ramsey every week.
Oh, yeah? That's a lot for you, man.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I like about it, as we've talked about before, is it sort of like has the feel of an AA meeting where you're hearing people who are so fucked up that you're like, man, I'm not feeling that. I'm not really that bad. And then you hear people who have fucked up so bad and come out of it. You're like, man, I could make it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what we're up to coming up next.
Yeah. Not horror related, although the world is a horror. And this is sort of like kind of about.
It's more about taking it up a notch.
Yeah.
But you can also email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org to address more horror related topics on this very podcast.
Yeah. What are we going to do next horror-wise? I'm down for The Fly, if you're down for The Fly. I know you're not into that.
Let me mull that over.
Yeah. Well, think about it. So no homework yet for...
And there are a couple of suggestions that I'll bring up from an email we got that might decide that.
Well, tune in. Maybe
Yes.
we'll have an answer by the end of this episode.
Do you have anything to plug?
Negative.
Me neither. I mean, I'm playing the San Francisco Electronic Music Festival in mid-September. I'll do a proper plug for that when we get closer to it. Sign up for our newsletter. You can go to scarythoughts.org and give us your information, and we will send you a delightful newsletter with every episode. And lastly, before we start talking about Stranger Things Season 3, spoilers ahead. See the series, come back, listen to our thoughts about it. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to start?
Well, I guess a good place to start is that I was on our brother's podcast, Popcorn, Piss, and Vinegar, pretty recently, talking about the season. And all of us walked away from a pretty glowing review of it for what it is. I think all of us were like, man, we all kind of grew up like these kids. We have absorbed every single bit of pop culture that the show is based on. And it's almost like going to a restaurant that serves all of your favorite things at once. And that would be awesome a couple times. And since that episode where I was pretty glowing about the show, I've thought about the show a lot more and thought about like Netflix series a lot more and the state of television in general. And I've come to like a much more negative opinion of the show than I did back then, even just a couple months ago.
Do you want to roll that out a little more detail?
Yeah, I think, when I watched this new season, I had the same experience when I watched the first and second season, although I didn't like the second season as much, which was it was just a lot of fun. I got super stoned, watched it over 2 days. It's exactly what I wanted to do that weekend. And it being the holiday weekend and 4th of July made it even more fun to just sit back and just waste time. And I walked away from that experience thinking that, man, that was a whole lot of fun, like in the way that you would go to a theme park or something like that. But some time passed, and then we talked about doing this show about it. And I started to rewatch it. I was like, man, this is not nearly as good as I remembered it. There's no way I could sit through the whole series again without wanting to just explode. And then I just started noticing more stuff about it that bugged me as I watched it the second time, or tried to watch it the second time.
Yeah, I only watched season 3 once, and I really liked it. I thought it was super fun, really enjoyed the whole experience. But then I think in the wake of it, realizing all of the tie-in deals that Stranger Things has with all of these products and companies, the ways that it has rippled out throughout our culture, I think is really overdetermined. Well, it's overvalued. I think it's in capitalism, overvaluation. It's waiting for the market to balance it back out. And in that, I mean, nobody at any point is ever going to say, oh, remember Seinfeld? Seinfeld just is. But I think it's not going to be too long before people are going to be saying, do you remember Stranger Things? Because I think it's going to be fairly forgotten. I think it's closer to something like the Macarena, where it's its impact is huge on culture, but it's not meaningful. It doesn't create meaning in the culture. There's not a deeper resonance. It just sort of sparks everybody's interest collectively suddenly.
Yeah, to me, I was thinking it's like rockabilly television almost. For a minute, rockabilly, which is thoroughly nostalgic, popped up. It was all over the place. There was Swingers, the movie, and you would see commercials of people swing dancing and shit like that. And then it was over.
Yep.
And it's weird once a nostalgic thing's moment has passed, its actual moment has passed twice or even more than twice, depending on how many times it comes back. And it really sort of makes you, if you're paying attention, really disappointed in culture broadly. I was just looking around, I was like, man, 90s are going to be coming in, and all of a sudden people are doing their grunge look on Instagram. And I mean I swear to God, this year we'll see somebody wearing Jinkos for real.
Sure.
There's no way that's not going to happen. And it's, I don't know, for somebody who's interested in seeing something new and weird all the time, to see something, especially something you lived through repackaged, it just seems kind of lazy. But there's also a pleasure in it, man. Seeing some perfect 10 runway model wearing a Nirvana inspired look is kind of alluring for some reason.
Well, but that's the thing. I mean, the reason why magazines and companies use really traditionally beautiful people to sell their clothes is because no matter what they're wearing, it makes it appealing. Just it's like when you see someone who's super hot walking down the street and they're wearing something weird and unique, it's easy to suddenly think oh, they have style. And well, what if it was on another person? Would you think that, or would you think they look dumpy?
Yeah. It's like the Gap campaigns, all just boring ass jeans and white t-shirt looks great on some people, you know, and some people it's just looks like you look like a house painter.
That's right.
Yeah.
I sort of feel we often talk about the idea of collective dread and what do these movies and books and TV shows, how do they resonate with contemporary anxieties? And looking at Stranger Things, I feel like it does not do so at all. There are certain things that it brings up that are back, like Russia's the enemy again, but it's not about collective dread. It's about collective nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's referencing it. So it's sort of an inversion. It's like nostalgia is the dread of onset meaninglessness. I think that's the collective dread, is looking back is this empty nihilist gesture, and maybe we can have anxiety about like the clock is ticking and you're going to die soon, so let's cram in as many good time feel good moments from the 80s as possible, even if you weren't alive back then.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the Russians being the villain again. The Russian whole thing is probably my favorite part of this series, just because it's so over the top and absurd. And you know, I watched so much Russians Are the Enemy movies when in the early 80s. Like Red Dawn is still one of my favorite movies ever. There's a lot of movies that weren't, you know, exactly Russian, but they're so like early 80s machismo right wing, like Conan, for example.
Yeah.
And that stuff, it's weird that those ideas and those tropes and aesthetics kind of get repackaged here and people still sort of enjoy them in a weird way. Like Chief Hopper is like an 80s action figure, you know, even down to the, you know, waking up drunk and with a hangover and going out to solve crimes that way. And then his kind of, there were so many blog articles written about like his shittiness to Eleven as a father. And I was like, man, this is exactly how his character was in the first, second season.
Right.
It's just, this is just what happens when times pass with this type of person.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want? Do you want like this idealized Hopper, or what are you asking for here? You know?
Right. Also the opposition between, you know, capitalist America shopping mall and the Soviets and Main Street USA versus the mall and all these tensions around capitalism and freedom and all that seem to be kind of running
really
under
dialed
the show.
up in the show. Like I would say, even with like you know, Lucas Sinclair's sister, whose name I can't Erica, yeah. Like that character is like this like comedic capitalist, like Michael P. Keaton character.
Yeah, but
right in the middle of the show.
If by comedic you mean funny, I think you're way off. I think that what's weird is that highlighting those questions a way of indicating the degree to which this opposition and tension has worked itself out in a sense, or is it an illustration that it is still present?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is it like because I mean, that's what happens when you look back. It's like, is this thing still here, or are we looking back at something that's distant? And I think it's unclear in this show because Walmart has done to small town America what malls did to small town America, and now Amazon is doing to mom and pop shops, and it's kind of the same thing. And then again, bringing up Russia is again our enemy, like the Soviet Union was during the Cold War. So these things are sort of flinging back, but they're actually very different.
Yeah, it's like this like idea of like cyclical anxiety.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the whole reason why they're able to have this mall set in the movie is because the mall that they shot in is mostly derelict because it's been pretty much put under by Amazon.
Absolutely.
Although now there's a bit of like Stranger Things tourism. The mall exists in Atlanta or outside of Atlanta.
So what's interesting is tech companies are buying up shopping malls because it's a ready-made campus.
Yes. Yeah, that's happening. There's also like a lot of concepts of mixed use malls where like some of the stores will become homes and you can live in the mall if you want to, which is very Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead or whichever one it is. Yeah. I was like, I actually, for my day job, I wrote this whole fucking Stranger Things inspired will malls come back from the retail apocalypse thing? Like fucking writing blogs for companies is fucking terrible. But yeah, like, so you're like, man, this is a physical space that once upon a time threatened other physical spaces, and now it's being threatened.
Yep.
And the show definitely doesn't make any nod or call to that, I don't think. But what it does do that I think is weird is you only get all this shit like from the 80s. You know what I mean? Like you only get the never-ending story, like epic puppet movies and like all the shit that is glorified in Stranger Things. So in one level, it's like saying like, hey man, 80s capitalism is fucking great. But then it's trying to be, I guess the show isn't really that critical of it actually. Like now that I think about it, like the show is not retroactively critical.
No, it doesn't take a position there.
And I actually think that's kind of cool. Like, I mean, if you're going to be into something and loving something that you loved as a kid, why would you cynically shit all over it like we're doing? I don't know. Although there's differences like loving the never-ending story, which I don't, versus loving a scene where the Neverending Story song is in it for fun. I don't know. I'm like, it's weird. Like this whole show, I've thought about it more than I thought about other shows, just because I'm thinking about like my relationship to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Another thing it did for me is I always find maybe every other episode, I realize there's a word missing from English to describe what I think that something is doing. Mm-hmm. And with this show, I think we don't have a word for the genre or the concept that I can think of that is a horror that is predicated on past horrors. So, for example, when we did House of the Devil, we were talking about the Satanic Panic. Mm-hmm. And so what does it mean to evoke the horror of something that we know doesn't exist anymore? And this is something we also addressed in our episodes about our episode about The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are, I guess, still afraid of ghosts because I don't know what's happening in the world. And people who believe that Ed and Lorraine Warren are legit. But
it's legitimately awesome.
Oh, my God. But, it's like, what would we call this? It's just like not retro horror. And it's not nostalgic horror because retro horror is about doing something that's retro. Nostalgic horror is about doing something that's nostalgic. But what is it when it is evoking a horror that does not exist anymore and trying to reify? I mean, even the movie The Witch does this in a sense. Like the devil is going to come and take your child away. This is completely absurd, but we're going to make a movie that reclaims that as something to fear. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Like we don't have a word for this.
Yeah, I was just thinking
this was scary, and we're going to make it scary again, but only based on itself, not because you actually fear this now.
Yeah, it reminds me also of, like, this show's not scary.
Oh no, it's a thriller,
and there's a lot of horror elements to it. Like, I mean, if you were to be all weird and about your taxonomy, I guess you would have to count this as a horror because there's so many like actual horror elements. But
it's very sci-fi too.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost got more in common with Event Horizon or The Thing than any slasher movie or.
Yeah, although I guess there's like slasher elements of it with Billy.
Yeah.
Or not even really. That's more of a sci-fi, like the whole being taken over thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I had all of my thoughts about the show emptied out just now as I was trying to formulate them.
It just
which I feel, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's a fun show, but when I go through my checklist of things to sort of engage with on this show, like rules of engagement, I don't fucking know. I don't even remember. A bunch of people just fought or something, and then the mall blew up. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like it just didn't really take hold. Like, how did they fight the monsters? I don't know. They shoved firecrackers up its ass or something.
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
Like I barely remember what happened now. I guess it's been like a month and a half since I saw it. I cannot even remember how it ended, which is probably a terrible way to talk about a show on a podcast.
I know,
but
it's real.
Yeah, I guess to try and grapple it in a different way, the things I like about it.
Oh wait, can I interrupt you for a second? It just occurred to me, talking about what is it, a horror or is it sci-fi or whatever? It's more like an action movie because there's no final girl. Everybody survives to the end, basically, except Hopper, but we know he's still alive.
Yeah.
Which is what an action movie does. You might lose a soldier or two along the way, but basically, action movies, a horror movie, everybody dies except probably the final girl. Mm-hmm. Even movies that don't exactly follow that, that's pretty much what happens in any horror movie, even not slashers. But this is like everybody survives. So it's more like an action movie.
You know who my favorite final girl ever is?
Tell me.
Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator.
That is not the first time Predator has come up in my life today, and I wish it wasn't so. Well, I've never seen it.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think we might have found our next episode.
Really?
Yeah. So Predator, okay, it's an action film, obviously. It has every fucking awesome action.
I love that you're taking time on this podcast to explain Predator to me.
Well, I'm just going to try and sell Predator to you.
Okay.
First of all, like the universe of Predator, especially where it touches up against Alien, there's like a crossover there, is great. like the whole Alien versus Predator thing. Not the films. The films are garbage, but the movies and the mythology of it and how it exists and how the two creatures sort of coexist is really interesting. But it's just a great action movie. And it's sort of like also, it's basically Alien in the jungle. You know, there's this thing coming to kill all these tough dudes, and Arnold Schwarzenegger makes it to the end in a final girlish kind of way. Like, he makes it out. It's fucking great. Get him to the chopper. It's so quotable. Like, it's such a quotable movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
But between now and the end of this episode, I will decide if I agree that we should cover that next.
Man, it's got machetes. It's got a Vulcan machine gun with Jesse the Body Ventura.
I don't know who that is.
What?
I know what a machete is. So anyway, you were about to say.
Fuck, I can't remember now.
I did interrupt you mid-thought.
That's the thing about the show is I really enjoyed it, and then I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah. Well, it is a texture. Mm-hmm. It is not great script writing. The acting is mostly fine, good, fun, competent. You know, the music is unique, but it's not earth-shattering. Mm-hmm. Cinematography, totally good. Monster building, pretty good ideas. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing revolutionary about this show overall other than that it is this aggressive texture of nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think. I watched this YouTube video about Japanese rockabilly dudes.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that. Like, these guys are like so committed to their thing, and they go dance in this park every Sunday.
I've been there.
Have you seen these dudes dance?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's the weirdest fucking thing. And like, they have like gigantic, perfect pompadours. Yep. Their clothes are all like legit from the 50s. But
what's really peculiar about these guys is they don't dance, or the ones I've seen and the ones that we're referring to, they don't dance in a private club. They dance in this park where there's hundreds of people standing around taking photos of them.
Yeah, and then there's other people with similar kinks, but like not, they're not other rockabillys, but they'll be like, you know, we're into like the Transformers or whatever. You know, like just down the road, there's like another group of.
Oh, I didn't see that.
It's just this area is just known for like just youth groups, but they're also not that young, which is kind of interesting. Like, nobody super young isn't into rockabilly. But then it also has their own weird things, like their dancing is not exactly what you would see in like 50s movies, but it's inspired by it. Yep. And then they do that weird thing where they tape up their boots.
Yeah, so that they can dance on concrete and not destroy their footwear.
Yeah, and some of them though, they believe that they dance a certain way because of a certain pair of shoes. And the shoes are already like 70 years old. So they're trying to like maintain the life of the shoe.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. It's so Japanese.
Wow.
I know. That's quite a digression here, but I feel like Stranger Things is almost a digression. Let's talk about the merchandise, the Stranger Things merchandise. Like, I got sucked up into it and bought a t-shirt.
You did?
I bought a Hawkins AV Lab t-shirt. I couldn't help it. It was weird. Like, I just had it on. And then every time I've worn it,
God, Amazon's got your fucking number.
Oh, dude, like Instagram ads, like, will get me every time for a silly t-shirt. But every time I've worn it, like, I've had like a really positive interaction with somebody who's like a super fan of the show. Like, somebody will come up and be like, oh my God, I love that show, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm having a moment with the stranger that I would never have with any of the sad and depressing books that I read. like no one's going like, oh, I see that you're reading the kindly ones. I really liked that. But like, nobody's saying that. I've never had a conversation about books unprompted on the street ever once.
Right.
You know, positive or negative, never. Yeah. But that t-shirt is out there.
Well, also, if someone walked up to you while you were in a cafe or walking down the street and was like, oh, you're into Schopenhauer, you'd be like, I already don't like you.
Yeah, I definitely
The fact that we have this in common is a strike against you.
But it also reminded me of like in the 90s or whenever, when you would wear like a, I don't know, like a Nine Inch Nails t-shirt, and then you would see somebody else in the mall wearing a Nine Inch Nails t-shirt, and you're like, oh, we're probably going to be friends.
Yeah.
But it's so mass culture that we're probably not going to be friends because you like Stranger Things. You know, it's like too broad almost. It's like being friends with somebody who likes Harry Potter. It's just
or Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Being really, 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 really into Game of Thrones is not actually so very special. It is for you, but it's not like being into some obscure one-man black metal band.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's because it's fed to you? Like, it's suggested to you by an algorithm created by a company that wants your money?
No, I just think it's like, I mean, partly, but it's also just the early 60s and you're like, I'm really into Elvis. So who isn't? It's not like I drive a car. It doesn't matter. It's not meaning. It's just, it's common, you know?
But I would say though,
you eat chicken too? Who cares?
But so there's another level of enjoyment though, I think that happens at this show to certain people. And it's kind of what we got into in the Popcorn, Piss and Vinegar show is if you were like these kids when you were little, that was weird. And so if you're the type of person who is like these kids and you're watching this show, it's like, for example, I went to the high school I went to that the Popcorn, Piss and Vinegar guys went to. There's like 3,000 people at that high school. I guarantee no more than 12 of them played D&D, and I was probably friends with all of them, right? So the idea that there's an entire mass movement of people watching a show about kids that used to play D&D is like, I see there's different levels of enjoyment, but if you were one of those kids...
Well, I was one of those kids.
Yeah, it's...
I was like an unmonitored kid on my bicycle, getting as far from home as possible. I played D&D, in fact, alongside, this show in particular. At some point, I think my friend who was a DM read that it was now okay that your character wasn't just only like a cleric, a dwarf, whatever. You could also be any monster you chose as long as you followed certain protocols. And I was a mind flayer. That was my character. And so,
that must have been easy when you went into a tavern to find out who the local lord was.
Anyway, so just like
don't mind this necrotic creature that wants to eat everyone's brain in here.
Well, like
this unholy aristocratic evil with tentacle faces. Pour him an ale, please. It's on the dwarf.
But it's like it's the most prominent thing about D&D in this show is they play it and there's a mind flayer and a demigorgon. But and that was what I was into. That primed me for Lovecraft.
One of the other mini pieces of Stranger Things merchandise that I bought was the D&D box set.
What are you going to do with it?
It's going to sit on my shelf next to my 2 Stranger Things books that I own.
Oh, man.
That's the thing is like I'm sitting here like on this episode thinking like, man, fuck this thing. Man, this perfect thing that was made for me that is just nostalgic, and nostalgia's bad. But I've like... to get kind of stoned and flip through the World Upside Down book is really fun, man. I feel like the Duffer Brothers would be super fun to hang out with.
No question.
Yeah. But then I think about who would be a more fun director to hang out with.
But so is Kevin Smith. It doesn't mean he makes good movies.
What? Tusk is fucking great.
Not true.
Oh, okay. But a director who I really love, Taika Waititi, who did Thor Ragnarok.
Yes.
So he's doing a similar thing. Like there's obvious a type of
who's
nostalgia.
playing Hitler in a movie that's coming out any day.
Holy shit! I cannot wait to see that movie.
Oh God! I mean,
he on his Instagram account has the classic. You take the scene where Hitler's freaking out from the movie Downfall.
Yeah.
And then people are telling Hitler something and he has a freak out and the subtitles do it.
Always funny.
Always funny. It's the funniest thing on the internet, always. But his is fucking great, where they're like basically telling him that there's going to be a new movie and Hitler is a character. He's like, oh, great. And they're like, but we have some bad news, mein Führer. And they're like, it's a Polynesian Jew is playing you. No. It's fucking great.
Oh, I'm glad that's a meme that's still getting mileage.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, I was really disappointed to hear, but like Disney basically bought everything, right? And so they just shelved that horror movie that's about like rich liberals hunting rednecks. So this movie is called The Hunt, and it's basically about rich liberals hunting Trump supporters in a most dangerous game type of scenario. And then the people who are the small town Trump people figure out what's going on and they go on like a revenge kill and like basically escape or whatever. This movie, because of the shootings that have happened over the summer, basically got pulled.
Yeah.
And so for me, like pulling a movie, go fuck yourself. I want to see this movie now more than I've ever wanted to see any movie ever, which is probably part of the whole, it'll eventually come out and that'll be the deal. It's weird when movies get shelved. Like Cabin in the Woods got shelved for like a year and a half. It's so weird. But that Taika Waititi movie, apparently when they're thinking about pulling movies and there's this whole like Disneyfication of everything, apparently they tried to kill that movie because people were like, well, what are people going to think of our brand because you have this movie with an imaginary childhood friend that happens to be Hitler. Like, it's so fucking weird, and it's obviously not. I mean, if you know Taika Waititi, it's obviously not glorifying Hitler in any way. And then the character is played so offensively. If you're a Nazi, you would hate this portrayal of Hitler, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, the whole reason why I bring up Taika Waititi is he does like similar nostalgia notes, but it doesn't feel like off-the-shelf nostalgia. Like Thor Ragnarok has a Led Zeppelin song in certain scenes, and it's very... Like, there's something forward about that. It has Jeff Goldblum with a wink and nod character, but it's just done differently. Mm-hmm. It's vibrant, whereas this show I don't think has the same vibrancy. It just has fun.
Yeah.
And fun's not bad, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we both keep saying disparaging things about it, but it is a show that I totally enjoy.
I can't wait to see the fourth one. When the trailer for this show came out with that Who song mixed in with like the Survives music, I like Baba O'Reilly is my favorite Who song, but and they were like coming in at summer. I was like, holy shit. There are things about this movie that are so accurate. Like the fair that they go to,
right?
I could have gone to that fair.
Sure.
You know, like it's exactly like the fair where I first heard Metallica and completely changed my life into the direction I would go. It's weird that the show hits so many of those buttons for me, but then is like not as satisfying on like second and third. It's like when you go to In-N-Out Burger and you get 3 doubles. Like the third one is still delicious, but it's tough to get through. It's not as good as the first or second one.
One thing I do kind of dig about the show, and I know this is a bit obscure to describe, but so I have this thing about when you've got a zombie show, right? A zombie movie. Do they use the word zombie or not? When there are vampires, does anybody know what a vampire is? You sort of have to make these decisions about like, okay, this horror, this alien, whatever exists in this world. Does the world already know about this thing, or is it the world we actually live in now? Is it introduced into this world, or is it a little bit shifted so that it accommodates a different perception of that horror, that alien? You know, like in the most obvious example to me is in The Walking Dead. They call them walkers. They don't. The word zombie never appears. But I feel like this show is the opposite. It names everything with taxonomic precision because it's tied to nostalgia, because it's tied to these direct pop cultural references from the 80s. Everything is as exactly named as possible, that it's almost a game.
Yeah.
To be specific.
But the mythology is totally original. Like, that's one of the things, like they call the thing a mind flayer, right? And that obviously, there's definitely like, anyone who's played D&D understands that there's part of the joy is in the taxonomy of the monsters.
Yes.
And understanding like what it means to be a green dragon versus a red dragon, or like the differences between dark elves and wood elves. Like all that stuff is, I guess, fascinating for a D&D player. I mean, I certainly love that shit.
Right.
So the kids are like applying the names of the things that they know to these creatures, but you know, the look of the mind flayer monster is pretty original. You know, the fact that it all of a sudden becomes this hive creature, and there's like the upside down is, I'm sure you could draw a line to it
the
somewhere.
Factors are unoriginal. I just more mean that when something appears on screen that is known, it is very known. That's more what I mean.
Oh yeah, like they all, they go from like discovering a thing to being totally okay with it within like 2 seconds.
Right.
Especially like the Russian base, and you're just like, that's almost more insane that they could have built that thing underground, then you just open a portal into another dimension within the world of the show.
Yes, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I have a sort of, I wouldn't call it a theory, but a possibility. And I know trafficking in these kinds of things is really tiresome. It's very Reddit worthy, but...
You about to roll out your fan theory?
Yeah.
Nice.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
This show it's sort of a Saint Elsewhere for me. This show could easily, the final episode of the final season concludes with that it was just them playing D&D the whole time. That this is all just an escapist fantasy for a bunch of bored suburban kids.
I mean, but they're aging, so...
Details.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a tough one. I mean,
but they're aging, but they could be aging in their fantasy. I mean, depends how this final episode turns out, but it could be the four of them looking exactly like they looked in the first episode. And they just like saved the world, saved the town, got the girl, like saved reconstituted their own families, et cetera, et cetera.
My fan theory is I think 11 is going to have like a dark side turn, and 11 doesn't make it through the series. I think she dies at the end.
Oh.
Yeah. I think also, like I mentioned this on the other podcast I was on, but they lay what I think is a little bit of foreshadowing where they're like, you can't keep having her do all this stuff. What if it gives her brain cancer or something?
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking that it would be interesting if it did a thing like Spawn. Like Spawn has only so much infernal power before, like once he's used up all of his Spawn powers, he goes back to hell to lead the armies of darkness against mankind or whatever. Imagine like it gets to a point where it's like, oh, if she keeps using her powers, she's going to die. But then she has to use her powers and saves everybody. Then she dies. Or she could go evil, like Dark Phoenix style. Because in the first season, there is a bunch of like references to that whole Dark Phoenix saga from X-Men, where, the superpower Jean Grey, who's badass and everybody loves, becomes this totally unmanageable death machine, which would be my pick of things to happen with that character.
Yes.
Yes. I just want to see her just like come through and just murder everyone in Hawkins.
That'd be great.
But I think something would have to be like done to her to have that happen. Like she would need to have like a tragic event. But maybe it's the Hopper, her dad died. She's already been sort of a punk rocker runaway, now her
best episode of the whole show.
What? Okay. So to me, that is the worst part of this entire show is the weird
Chicago.
Yeah.
I wish we revisited them in season 3. That would have been great.
I think they're gone. I think you'll never hear about those characters ever again.
Yeah, I'm a little bitter.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I was hoping, or the other thing I was talking with my friends about was that, okay, what if just like The Walking Dead, Stranger Things kind of spreads out, because they talk about how that's the most powerful node, but it's not the only node. And so my idea was like, oh, what if there was more of like a Repo Man style Stranger Things spinoff set in LA? How badass would that be?
It'd be great.
Yeah. Total punk rock soundtrack. It'd be pretty cool.
It would. Something it did, a trope that it brought up that I found annoying, it's a trope that I'm finding more and more annoying, is I'm sure there's some YouTube video that's named it, but where a couple has a fight and they go through a thing and it solves their problem. I mean, most movies that have a romantic component, the solution to the interrelationship tension is solved by an external force, not by them doing any work.
Mm-hmm.
So, Die Hard, best movie ever. He's a shitty husband, but he saves the Nakatomi building, so he gets a girl in the end.
Yeah.
Most movies are like that. It's just, and if the woman is a total secondary character, it's that she rejects him for some reason, but he proves that he's not a bad guy by doing something heroic or noble.
Mm-hmm.
But it actually has nothing to do with the fact that he might be a total fucking asshole that is intolerable or something like that. And in this show, Mike and Elle have this split, and then they go through all these trials and tribulations and then come out the other end like harmonious again. It's like, well, they didn't actually solve their issues. They just had an adventure.
Yeah, I feel like, though, they're not really back together at the end of the series, though, are they?
No, but I don't know, but the relationship is healed.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting about the show is that it doesn't bring the romantic leads back together in a satisfying way. It has more of like a Empire Strikes Back sort of ending. Hopper's presumably dead. The relationship with Winona Ryder's character is not ever really consummated in any real way. They don't even have like a farewell kiss. Mike and 11 aren't back together at the end. The only relationship that really has any sort of actual closure is Dustin and his imaginary Mormon girlfriend from across, 80s internet and the ham radio.
Which I loved. I thought you see it coming a mile away. Like the fact that he's leaning in so hard, like, no, she's real. She's real. Mm-hmm. She's obviously real. The show made it such that there was no possible way she wasn't real.
Well, one of the great things about the character Dustin is that it was written to be kind of different. It was written to be this like fat slob loser character. And the actor that plays him is just so not that. He's this really vibrant Broadway kid with some weird disease that makes him not have teeth, which is
it's not quite how it is, but okay.
Well, that's exactly what it is. His teeth are not coming in because of his weird bone stuff. He doesn't have collarbones. It's just those are just the facts of that kid. And he really wanted to be an actor, and the force of his personality, like good luck getting cast. Like he even talks about it on some late night show. I was watching, and he's like, it was really hard to get cast. And these Duffer Brothers like saw him, altered the character a little bit, so the character like is really enhanced by the actor, which I think is
for sure
phenomenal. But the character is ultra competent. He's almost like a MacGyver character.
Yeah.
And I would say probably, I think the best character on the show is Dustin. At least my favorite character after Billy. Billy's my favorite character, but then after that is Dustin. But yeah, it seems so right that he wouldn't have been
Your favorite character is Billy.
Yeah, of course. Oh, another relationship that doesn't get consummated, Billy and Mrs. Wheeler.
That would have been, I think they should spin off. I think that would be great. Just a show about their relationship.
Yeah.
I think that's worthy of seasons of
content. Unfortunately, he's dead now, which sucks.
Is he?
He's dead.
Is he?
He gets... I think shows like this have to sacrifice one or two characters per season, and this is one of the characters that gets sacrificed. But I also think it's totally plausible that he would have been able to nail Mrs. Wheeler.
Oh, good. Like fucking small town, of course.
Yeah.
Going back to speaking about retro, you know what else is really retro? Racist stereotypes. So fucking Erica is the most one-dimensional character in this show of many one-dimensional characters.
Yeah, like I think the character that gets the shortest shrift is her brother Lucas Sinclair. Like there's just nothing.
He is not much in this show.
Not much in this show. Not that interesting of a character.
No.
Like really just not.
He was in season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Like he was sort of like the fucking annoying voice of reason. Or like she's not one of us. Like it was really one-dimensional, but at least he served a purpose. Well, she serves a purpose, but she's so like hand on hip fucking annoying. Like everything out of her mouth is the same.
Yeah, it's
just
a classic
condescending nonsense.
So so this show, like I think season 1 is like, oh, this is set in the 80s. This is set in the entertainment of the 80s is how I would describe this season. And I feel like she's like a central casting bratty little sister.
Right.
There are things like for instance, some of the acting of the kids in this season is so over the top to me but it was so good in previous seasons. Like they didn't just forget how to act. I feel like it's probably the direction of the series is to have like it be more amped up.
There's so much nattering and back and forth between Winona and Hopper and Elle and Mike. Like there's just so much annoying fighting that doesn't go anywhere, and I think it's played for laughs and it's not funny. I think that's kind of the weakest part of season 3 is these scenes that go on far too long where nobody's saying anything interesting or funny or moving the plot forward or developing characters. It's just like repartee without the wit.
I don't know that it doesn't advance the plot. I was actually thinking about how this has the Spielberg quality of little moments between characters do sort of provide exposition a little bit. Like I think the show is nice that nobody goes, and then there's a dimensional portal down. Like nobody ever really sits down and like talks it out. There's not like a villain character. There's no villainous trifling really in the show.
Right.
But they're figuring it out in conversation in these small moments. Like I think probably my favorite part of this season is the Ships Ahoy stuff. They're just bored at work, like teenagers bored at work, and they kind of Hardy Boys their way into a Russian conspiracy, which is great.
It's cute. I did like the introduction of what's her name, Uma Thurman's daughter. I thought she was really solid.
Yeah.
addition to the cast?
Clarice O'Donnell is her name.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I have no idea what her name is.
So, of this cast, who do you think is going to go full, like, Feldman Lohan?
You mean who will break out from it, or who will crash and burn?
Crash and burn, like, in an incredibly public, spectacular way.
Probably Erica. She's going to catch way too much heat for being a positive black capitalist on TV. She's like basically the Candace Owens of of Stranger Things.
Oh, that was really heavy.
I can't believe I haven't seen anybody make that comparison at all. I think people just like are so into the idea of this like she's kind of like she has a mean mug face. She's got like an older woman's face, which I think is pretty awesome. I don't know. And I also like that she just shits on her brother. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny.
It was funny once.
Yeah. But I don't know. Who do you think is going to train
I
back
don't
out?
know. It was just a mean question.
I mean, look, with a cast of children, this many children, someone is definitely.
That's why I asked.
Yeah,
it's like all these kids, and acting is not good for kids, or being that public, being that famous has a real toll on young people.
But you never know, man. These kids, like, the hunt is on for Hollywood pedophiles. So these kids might make it. This might be like the first generation of child actors to not be abused by creepy producers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a whole new world we're stepping into, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, like if fucking Michael Jackson was around, these kids would be diddled into oblivion. But who knows? You know.
Oh wow. Thanks for listening.
Sorry. I don't know, man. Like who would be like? It's usually like the zaniest character is the one that goes off, like your Andy Dick type. You know,
right.
So who do you think is the Andy Dick of Stranger Things?
Fuck, I don't know. Yeah. God.
You know how I can tell Chief Hopper's coming back? Other than the Spielbergian lighting around him when he allegedly disappeared, when he dies, is Hellboy was so fucking terrible that like he might have had the film star escape velocity, but not now. Like he's got to go back to the show.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think it's just obvious because it was so clearly not answered.
Yeah.
Like the answer is not that he's dead. The answer is that he's still alive. Whatever. I just don't understand how he can fight like that. I mean, he's an out of shape, small town cop alcoholic. There's no way. Like his American hero duking it out in the parking lot.
But he's an 80s cop movie icon.
No, I know.
You know what I mean? Like to me, I love how they packaged up a bunch of different shit into him. Like there's like the Last Boy Scout is there, Magnum PI is there, obviously, right?
Right, but he fights like Chuck Norris.
Yes, which I think is great.
But for again, an out of shape alcoholic small town cop is just totally silly.
I don't know, man. Meanness takes you pretty far sometimes.
Against trained killers from the Soviet Union.
You don't know how badass Hopper is. You don't know what sort of shit he went through. He could have been like in Nam or something like that.
I don't think. Okay.
Well, I don't know. Like, let's think timeline 87. He's probably about 40. He could have fought in Vietnam. He could have done a year or two.
No, sure. I guess the question that arises, and maybe Eugene Robinson would be an expert on this kind of question, but like, if you learn how to fight in a combat situation, like let's say Vietnam, where a lot of people who went to Vietnam weren't exactly like, I'm going to learn to be a death machine. They're just like, forced to go and fight and mostly shoot at the air and try not to get killed. Come back with skills that even if they spend the rest of their lives sitting on a couch drinking beer, not actively honing or reifying their skills as a fighter, that they can somehow turn it on and take out people who are active militants.
Yeah. There are two great Hopper moments though, like in the show one is like Han Solo level badass, where he has the gun to the back of the guy's head and he's counting to 3, and at 3 he pulls the fucking trigger. I love it. Like, I mean, he doesn't kill the guy, but it's just like, okay, he's not fucking around.
Yeah.
And then when he just ices like 4 Russians at the same time with the AK-47.
Totally satisfying.
Such a great, and the way he just swings it, I was like, man, I would love to kill Russian soldiers in a secret underground lab. It seems like it would be so much fun.
It was a great ad for that particular rifle.
Yeah, the AK variant.
Let's not talk about that. That's not the time. I read something really funny in Vox where the writer said...
do tell, Vox reader.
Oh, yeah. Stranger Things isn't really a young adult series. It's a Gen X Forrest Gump.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that's as astute as it gets. Yeah. Like that. I mean, I'm loath to agree with anything from Vox, and
I agree with that.
But I completely agree that this is for Gen Xers, but young people fucking love it, man. Like they're like 20-year-olds in my office think it's great. They're super into it.
It's kind of the Ghostbusters of now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Kids are dressing up as it. Kids are into it. It is pretty graphic. The horror is pretty real, but it seems kids' tolerances for graphic gore.
Yeah. Well, also I think a thing that's really interesting to people is the fashion of this season. People are a little bit more interested in. Like, you can get every T-shirt that's worn in this show, even down to the fact that the science teacher was wearing the Weird Al T-shirt.
Yes.
So Weird Al was like, holy fuck. And he he reprinted that T-shirt and sold out. I'm so bummed I didn't get it. I'm sure I could probably still get it.
It's pretty brilliant.
But yeah, so you have Weird Al. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I have always appreciated about this show style-wise is that most retro, totally 80s reproductions are a very slender rendering of what the 80s looked like. Mm-hmm. And people in this show dress, it's over-stylized, but they don't all look good. A lot of it is like bad 80s fashion, which I love. Like Barb's clothes were like really ill-fitting. Actually, what's the lead, the older sister character in the show? She's really small. I don't know the names of almost anybody in the show.
Yeah, they've all faced
whatever. Like her clothes are, people dressed like that in the 80s. Not flattering, not good clothing. Also the hair scale on some of the guys in this show. I had hair that fucking voluminous. It was a terrible choice. It does not look good.
Yeah, a lot of people had very penis-shaped heads in this season.
I'm not saying that's what mine looked like, but thank you for that.
It does a little bit like what Mad Men did so well, which is like it's not just what happened in 1964. It's like, okay, there's still shit laying around from 1954.
Absolutely.
So there's like 70 shit, like, especially one on the right, the Byers' house is definitely like, it's old as fuck. It's totally beat down. And I think like the cars are great in this show. Like they're really excellent selections of vehicles. The architecture looks great. I mean, the look of everything is so good. Like it must have been so much fun to like build the sets for this show.
For sure.
Especially the mall. Like building the Starcourt Mall out was probably pretty badass.
Yeah.
I wonder what the process like that is. Like, do you approach the Gap and say, hey, look, we'd like, is the Gap paying to be in it? Or is it, I mean, of course, right? It must be.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think I'm out.
I don't know what else. I mean,
the only thing I've got to say is Elle has now killed a lot of fucking people.
Oh yeah, she's a fucking maniac.
Yeah, she's just murdering.
Yeah,
and that might need to be reckoned with.
Well, that's my Dark Phoenix thing, which is she's murdering people heroically, but then it's just a hop and a skip to, well, if I wipe out this planet, Earth will be safer. Okay, well, if I wipe out everyone, it's this weird, like Dark Phoenix is so terribly represented in the movies. Like, it's the most disappointing character. I mean, it's such an interesting character, like a really average girl next door that becomes a dark god. There's just something so cool about that path.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any other than your previous fan theories, like where do you think season 4 is going to end up at? Do you think they're all off to college?
Unfortunately, I think that it might just be more of the same. Just, they'll somehow all come back together and fight another version of the Demogorgon, But I would hope that it takes a risk and does something radically different.
Yeah, I was, in Marvel films, like once you go cosmic, you can't back up from cosmic. You know
Which
what
is
I mean?
why I hate Marvel films.
Right. So this movie, at the end of, and I keep calling it a movie, which is, I guess, part of the design of it, really.
You did on our first episode a lot,
I know,
too.
I did. Yeah, but I mean, also the Duffers, they say that they think of it as a long movie with intermissions.
Fair.
But, you know, like the military has come to this town. Like it's a major military action against the Soviets at the end of it. So you could end up in a very, what I think would be really cool is if it went down this total alternate history kind of route where there's like where somehow there's like a, you know, superhero Cold War kind of thing happening. I think would be cool. Like if you introduce like, oh, is there a Russian 11 type character or something like that?
Oh, and then it's like
Rocky IV
versus
yeah. And then, like, you know, the Russian 11 is standing over Hopper. If he dies, he dies. It'd just be
dear
great.
God.
Yeah. That's all I have.
All right. So this was an email written to whatthe@scarythoughts.org. Thanks so much for creating such a compelling podcast. I just recently caught on to it.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to Kevin Clark, who is a very good friend of mine, and listen to an episode a day, except for Naked Lunch, which took like 3 days. Also, you were both totally off base regarding the movie, but I digress.
That we liked the movie?
I don't know what he means.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know you have discussed doing Silence of the Lambs. I think you definitely should, and have Monique back on too, because the gender politics of that movie is bananas. I would also suggest an episode on Annihilation. It's so fantastic and underrated. I think it's even better than Ex Machina. The Sleeper Must Awaken. Chuck Luter. Thanks, Chuck. So Silence of the Lambs.
I love it.
Absolutely.
It's an unimpeachable film.
No question.
I think, especially in our post-ContraPoints world, that character is definitely, like, the Buffalo Bill is interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Because like my thing, here's the drinking game. I'm going to mention Fight Club. Like the beginning of Fight Club where he's trying to get medicine and he wouldn't, he's like, I'm not going to give you anything to sleep. You just go home and work out and take some valerian root. That would not happen. He would be immediately given whatever pills he wanted. I feel like the character Buffalo Bill now would have been allowed to transition. And it's interesting to think like how that would have affected the storyline. I mean, I know the Silence of the Lambs takes place in the 90s or whatever, but it'd be interesting. Like, would Buffalo Bill have been as homicidal if the transition had happened?
It would be so different.
Yeah. If we do that episode, I'd have to reread the books, I think, because they're...
Did you read them?
Oh, they're phenomenal.
I've heard they're great.
Yeah,
my mom was totally into them.
They're awesome serial killer procedurals, but they're also... it's almost like they're not like John Grisham. You know how like a John Grisham book is just totally pleasing and you can read it in like a weekend or whatever? These books are like that, but the subject matter is also so dark.
Right.
And the Red Dragon is fucking great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be down to do those
put that
movies.
on the list.
Yeah.
Have you seen Annihilation?
I have not.
You read it though, right?
I can't remember.
It's a Vanderbeek. Holy shit, Vandermeer. As part of the Southern Reach trilogy.
Oh, I haven't read those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Book's great. Movie's great. I don't know that there's as
Is it
much
horror?
Adjacent. Yeah, I mean it's soft sci-fi. It's like sci-fi the way Stalker is sci-fi, but also horror enough. There's stuff to chew on. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. The movie is such a study in style more than content.
Oh, I remember the trailer. I really wanted to see that movie completely. There's been like 5 horror movies that I really thought had great trailers recently that I just never ended up seeing.
Yeah.
Like this movie Ready or Not is supposed to be great.
I'm so excited about Ready or Not.
Yeah, everybody, I guess it's out. People are
talking.
Yeah,
it's, I think, the last showing started 15 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
So we're not going to that tonight.
Not seeing that tonight.
Is that it?
Yeah. Any more mail?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. You fuckers don't like us. No more mails.
They love us.
Yeah, I guess they do.
Be nice. All right. Send us emails. to keep Chad from disparaging you all.
Yes.
To at scarythoughts.org. Yeah. Next episode will be Self-Help for Nihilists, our debut episode. You can email us about that at nihilists@scarythoughts.org. And
we are so close to having 100 reviews on iTunes. We haven't brought up the review thing in a long time just because, we sort of gave up on it and realized it didn't matter, that the ghouls of Apple and Google will decide what they want regardless of whatever you try to do. But it is bothering my OCD so much that it's at like 96. So if there's like 4 of you ghouls out there who haven't reviewed the show, just go in there and give it a 5-star rating, just or even a 1-star. I could give a fuck just as long as it hits 100. So,
ditto. All right, that's it.
All right,
thanks for listening.
Party on, you animals.